So I want to show everybody how to use the resin printers we have, the SLA printers. Now, what we do have are Formlab printers. We have two different types. We have the Form 1, which is an older and technically no longer supported model. It's not technically, it's not. And then we have a Form 2 printer. Now, as we talked about before, that like a lot of the filament printers and frankly a lot of other types of resin printers have different or more universal slicer programs. Formlabs, while I think there are some that are trying to make use of or be able to be used with more universal programs, Formlabs is very proprietary, both in the actual hardware and the resins and the software they use. So, in order to use our printers that we have, going to go over, just show you real quick, going to the internets, just going over to formlabs.com or just Formlabs, and it'll bring up the PreForm software. That is the name for their software. Obviously, they have one for Mac and for Windows. Now, in our room, both of these still use, and I say still use, the Form 2, the larger Formlabs printer. I don't know, but they might be phasing that out entirely also because they have phased out support for the Form 1. So currently on our computers in the room, the one that is listed for that is next to the Form 1 printer, do not update the software on that. It has an older release of the software that does support the Form 1. Otherwise, they work essentially the same, and for what we're doing, it's probably going to be the same. The only differences usually are going to be in the material accessibility. Because Formlabs has far more diverse and newer resins available for their printers. But for what we have, they are essentially interchangeable. Now, there are distinct differences in what kind of resin can be used in either of them and how to change resins. It unfortunately is not as straightforward as swapping out filament on the other printers. But just so you know, you go here, download those. You don't have to download it on your own computers because we have it on the desktops that are associated with the printers. But should you want to install PreForm on your own your own computer, there we are. So swapping back over, how do we do this stuff? So swapping over to Fusion. Come on. Ugh. There we go. Forgot what button it is. How do you prep an object for printing? Well, for the project we were just using, the ring project, ideally, or if a bracelet or whatever wearable, this needs to be one single body. Yes, I had y'all create the parts in different components, things like that. But for the case of this project, if you're printing them, you do need to join them together. Now, you can obviously just join them together as is, or you can select all the things and go to combine. And when you go to do this, if you still want to be able to play with this, you can always select like new component and keep tools, and it'll kick it out as a new component that has joined the parts together, and it'll keep your original. As I've already done here, I have the two separate objects on different components here, but when I join them together, it dropped it into an additional component here that just has everything linked into one body. Make sure that you go down, expand the project, expand the bodies. You have one body. Label it what you need. From there, standard procedure, go to File, 3D Print, uncheck the Send to 3D Printer, and then just kick it out as normal. We can still use STL format. There's no need to change that out at the moment, but just know that that works. Go to save it wherever you're saving it locally on your computer. There you go. It already exists, so yeah, replace it, whatever. Same diff. From there, open up PreForm, and basically it's very similarly the same thing, or it's very much the same project or same kind of slicer. You've got your virtual environment here. Of course, the keystrokes are different because, of course, they got to be different. But it does still have a relative side here. Now you'll read on here, it says front, but it also says wiper side. And if you look at the printers, one of the major differences here, of course, is that It's upside down, or at least from how familiar you are, or how you are familiar with the other printers, the filament printers. Those print, your platform is flat on the ground, an XY axis. On the resin printers, that is inverted. So the tray, or rather the table, goes down, dunks into the liquid vat tank, and then raises upward with each increment. And they have a little wiper built into it. What that is it just wipes bubbles off the surface and things like that, because you're dealing with a liquid instead of a solid filament. From there, it's essentially the same. Do make sure you have the correct type of printer selected. Now, if you are plugging in either with your laptop or that's already plugged in with the desktop, it will automatically detect what kind of printer is here. But you can go over here, select your type, your printer type, click the button, it'll bring up a whole thing. This is not physically connected, and those are not networked, so I can't connect actually to that printer. But you have a whole slew here. Do not confuse this. Fuse one is not the Form one. This is actually for their powder, their silica powder fusing printer. Totally different thing. So, and we don't have any of the fancier Form 3s or 4s. So we're just sticking with the 2. And you will select what material we're using. Right now, I have the flexible resin selected, or rather in the printer, so it's also selected. The other materials we have are clear and gray. So for now, we'll stick with flexible. Now, flexible will change the print times because it prints much slower, but there we go. So, all right, all good. Underneath there, we select OK. Oh, whoops, one last thing there. I forgot to show you. You scroll down to the bottom, depending on what material you're using, you have limited selection for the layer thickness. So like with the filament printers, your layer thickness is the quality of print. 1 millimeter being the thickest, 0.1 millimeter being the thickest, 0.05 millimeter being regular, or the finest this one will go. If we switch to clear, you have even finer options, 0.025. So depending on the material you're printing with, you will have different options available. But just to note, the thickest this will print in layers is 0.1 millimeter. Our standard layer height we were using was 0.3 or even 0.2 for finer detail on the filament printers. So just as comparison, the rough texture or the rough print on these is even still finer than the filament printers can print. So that's really the main difference there. We have some different options, but again, right now, those are the main ones we're using. So I just wanted to go over that real quick. So, all right, so you can drag and drop stuff in or go to File and import a new one. Let's open the file, go to printable ring, drop it in there. Boop. Now, it's going to give you a whole bunch of errors at first because we haven't supported anything yet. Right now, you can move it around. You can, of course, scale it as needed. Ideally, if you've already measured this and done all your done your measurements, not calculations, just measurements in Fusion, it'll print 1-to-1, no problem. Now, it's giving me a whole bunch of errors here, and looking over here, print validation, supports, everything like that. Yeah, that's because you have to support these things. While technically you can print flat on the surface, I very, very, very recommend against printing directly on the surface, meaning that technically I could rotate this 90 degrees or 180 degrees. Oh, not 4,180, and print it flat on the platform. Technically, you could do that. It's just advisable to not, mainly because where the filament printers flexes and kind of pops off, these do not have that option, and you basically have to scrape them off. So you're, especially if you have a highly detailed form or design, you're gonna like do damage to the finished print. So honestly, I would recommend just using the auto settings for everything. So like auto orient, you open up the rotation, and wow, it tilted it ever so slightly. Thanks, buddy. Supports, auto generate supports. You have to have supports on this. Now, what it's going to generate is this whole little scaffolding system. It's kind of a blend of what we were working with the standard supports and the organic supports. Newer versions of PreForm that go with the newer printers will allow for organic supports, I believe, but so far we're sticking with these. You can auto arrange too, but frankly, it doesn't really matter where. This is just if you had multiples, selecting copy, print, 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 or copy, paste. Now auto arrange, make a whole bunch. But there you go. So you can make a whole bunch of these, print them exactly the same. You're all set. But let's not do that. There we are. Does not matter where you place this on the print bed. Go nuts. If you want to put it right in the middle, that's fine. If you want to put it on the sides, doesn't matter. It's all right. They all stick pretty well the same. So now what you would do is just confirm everything. You're all set, and just go to upload print. And because these are physically connected through USB, you can just go to upload print. It will take you through the prep for prepping the actual printer, and away you go. Before you do, it'll give you some time estimates. All right, it'll take 4.5 hours to print this as is. Volume 5.8 milliliters. It's not a lot, but again, it's liquid, so there we are. All right, so just out of curiosity, what if we want to change the materials and go with something more rigid? So like the clear we have access to. Change that out. I can, of course, change, let's make it finer. 0.05. Apply that. Yeah, what you get with this prompt, this is just, I've changed the materials and stuff like that. Do I want to keep the same like layout, supports, all that stuff? You can just either delete them and restart, or press import, and it just brings those same settings over and recalculates with the new version. Might as well let it do that. Okay, so you can see how much more fine the supports are now. They're much thinner because it's no longer a flexible material that's like squishy. And it dropped a whole 15 minutes on the print time. But also I made this a lot finer detail. You can, of course, go back and change that. Let's make it fastest, 0.1 millimeter. Yes, import, yada, 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 yada. All right, so that dropped it to 2.5 hours. So changing the print quality obviously makes a significant difference. Once you do that, away you go. Now, in the future, you will probably learn different ways. I don't mean like in the future, like our own class or whatever. I just mean through experimenting and such. You'll find different ways of supporting your design to minimize impact, because these do have to have supports. But you would design your work to either have them supported so that you have minimal cleanup, or it's easier to sand. So like right here, sure, technically that bottom part of that ring, I'd be able to like lay flat on some sandpaper and sand it much more easily. Then again, getting in between these other facets might be kind of a pain. So if that's the case, you might look into, we have the auto orient. See, every time I do this is going to like completely change stuff. Maybe you decide instead, rotate it more like so, and now recalculate, generate supports. It's got a whole lot more supports, but the supports on the jewel part are far more minimized, and I have a lot easier access to support, or to clean off the supports on the other side. So that's the only thing. Doesn't change the print time. It totally depends on how easy is this to clean off. And you can, of course, play with the settings here if you want to try to get some better details or minimize the amount. But because this is such a small object, and because it's high detailed, I would leave the supports as is. And just go to upload print. Now, I can't record because I don't have the camera over there, how to change out materials and such, but I'll, of course, go over that now and then with anybody individually. But that's pretty much how to use Formlabs, or the PreForm slicer, and getting the Formlab printers set up. There we go.